Let's start with the news of the week, Nick, and that is Patrick Toney. He is joining the Arizona Cardinals, as well as William Peagler, and then Kerry Colbert is also headed to the NFL, where he will be coaching the wide receivers with the Denver Broncos, a team that he used to play for. And Billy, he had enjoyed some staff being in place for about 14 months, and now a week before spring ball, Nick, everything gets disrupted.
Yeah, there's no right time to have coaching turnover. Having staff continuity is great, and not just for a coach, but for a program, especially a program. Having talked to Billy, just over a week ago, asking him how much smoother the operation runs now that you're in year two, that all the coaches and all of your returning players know what's expected, know how practices run, know how workouts run. And just the flow of things. Now, 9 days before spring camp, you're replacing 3 coaches. You've already replaced one, and we'll get into that later, but it's not an ideal time, with spring camp coming just around the corner. And then you have to ask the question like, hey, Kerry Colbert left. Florida had an awesome wide receiver class. How did Aiden Mizell, Trey, and Andy Jean, how do they feel about losing their coach? You saw some of the tight ends take to Twitter, and we have a recruit reaction as well as a player reaction up on Gators Online. But how do the guys who were in those rooms feel about probably learning about this on Twitter as well? Sometimes, especially in these situations when coaches leave, the players are the last to know, and they find out on social media. Tough, and Billy's got his work cut out for him. You've got a very short amount of time to get coaches in place for what I think is going to be a pivotal spring camp for you at so many different positions.
And what we already know is that it appears that Tony's replacement has already been found in Austin Armstrong, who's currently, or I should say was currently, at Alabama, although his profile is no longer on their site. He got swiped with the quickness.
404 error, real quick.
Yeah. And but he's coming over, reuniting with Billy Napier, who he worked with at Louisiana with 2 stints. And in between that, he spent the 2019 season at Georgia with Kirby Smart.
Mm-hmm.
And then had just been hired by Nick Saban at Alabama. So definitely a lot of pedigree there, some familiarity with not only Napier, but Tony's defense and having coached under him. And so I think there's a lot of familiarity there. It's going to probably be a really smooth transition, not only for the staff, but for the players. And so the hire makes a lot of sense. Now, he's a young guy. I mean, you're not getting an experienced play caller if he indeed is going to be the DC, although he'll probably have a co-DC tag just like Patrick did. But nonetheless, that, at least for now, as we speak to you guys here Thursday evening, is the hire that we know is coming. And I would imagine that by March 4th, when the Gators start spring ball, that those other 2 coaches will probably be replaced by then as well. And from talking to Billy Wednesday, certainly about Tony, but it seems like he had a sense, obviously, that this was about to go down. And one comment that he made to me was, hey, we lose 4 to 8 coaches every year. And this is just part of the business, not trying to downplay the significance of those guys, but you have to have contingency plans in place. And given how quick it seems that Austin Armstrong was hired, Billy's moving fast. And like I said, I would expect that you'll see a wide receivers coach and a tight ends coach hired pretty soon here as well.
And here's a little nugget. I have a story coming out about Austin on Friday, depending on when you're listening to this. You might hear it here first. I'm guessing fans will be a little gun shy hearing, young rising star, coveted coach, because Patrick Toney was that, and the defense was terrible last year. But Armstrong, a guy that spent last year at Southern Miss, he had multiple opportunities. Oregon came calling. Kirby Smart told him, hey, hold where you are. If Will Muschamp leaves, you're going to be my defensive coordinator. That's a 2-time defending national champion. Obviously, Will Muschamp doesn't leave. Georgia doesn't have an opening. Nick Saban grabs him, gives him the Saban stamp of approval, makes him an inside linebackers coach. So this isn't just a Billy's trying to get the next up and comer and hiring. This is a coach who had 3 massive Power 5 schools coming after him just this last offseason.
Yeah.
And time will tell, but it appears, at least early on, that Florida got a really good one here in Austin Armstrong.
And I do want to say, because I had a Florida fan reach out to me on Thursday and was like, after the 3rd coach in 2 days to leave for the NFL, and he asked me, should I be worried as a UF fan? And I responded with one way to look at it, which was, hey, the NFL just hired 3 of Billy's coaches. I think that says something about his eye for talent. Usually you got to worry about your coaching staff getting rated by rival schools or schools within your league. Billy just had 3 of his coaches taken away by the NFL. And I will say that I don't think that they will be the last assistant coach from Billy's staff to wind up in the NFL at some point. You already have 2 on his staff that used to coach in the NFL, in the co-DC and the OC. So, that obviously right there stands to reason. But just the way that the game has evolved. Now, you've got guys like Patrick Toney, according to Napier, who's always had a goal to coach in the NFL. He said, ever since I met the guy, that's what he wanted to do. I think for Kerry Colbert, being a former NFL receiver, no surprise really that he's decided to make this jump and wants to coach at that level. And then William Piegler as well. You get an opportunity to move up and coach at the highest level, you're going to take it, even if it means a demotion in some cases. We're seeing Toney go from being a DC or co-DC at Florida to being an assistant coach in the NFL. Well, Brian Johnson did the same thing, being Florida's OC and then deciding to go be the QB coach for the Eagles. But I think bigger picture, I just think this is going to be a growing trend that we see throughout the sport, because you're just going to have coaches that want to leave and go to the league because of the way the game has changed with NIL, with transfer portal. It's just a lot more, I think, appealing to work as a coach in the NFL. Plus, again, it is the highest level. So when guys get that phone call, there's nothing else that you can expect. And if anything, this says something about Napier and his ability to go find talent, and you're trying to fill out your staff. Certainly a great selling point to your next coaches of what happened to the guys that they're going to replace.
Come hang out with me for a year and then you'll be in the NFL.
Yeah, not bad.
Good selling point. I wrote about it in my column. Go read that at Gators Online, but you touched on it just there, and it's NIL has created free agency. So not now, in the past, a coach would spend their nights and weekends texting 16, 17-year-old high school kids to try to get them to come to their campus. But once they signed that dotted line, they were there. Like, hey, that recruiting job is now done. That's not the case anymore. And now NIL has seeped its way into recruiting, but also into your locker room. And now you're not done recruiting a guy once they sign their NIL or their NLI. You're having to re-recruit your roster over and over and over again, year after year. Until college football figures out a way to normalize their schedule, their transfer portal schedule, which has 2 different windows. The signing day has 2 different windows, and you're constantly re-recruiting your guys. Until you figure that out, hey, I'll take a pay cut to go to a higher level of football where I don't have to do this.
And I'm not as stretched as thin.
Yes, I took a pay cut, but my quality of life is significantly better. I leave the office and I don't have to call 13 guys. I don't have to DM 13 different guys. I'm not getting a call from one of my players about like, hey,
I need a new NIL deal.
My NIL deal didn't come. It's like, hey, man, I can't help you with that. So until the NCAA, who continually gets clowned as they ask the government for help, and the government's just like, you're a disaster, until the government fixes it. And listen, the government doesn't move quickly. The government doesn't legislate quickly at all. So I don't know what the timetable is to get, a better calendar for recruiting and transfer portal and NIL legislation. So this isn't just a Florida thing. Yes, it's happened to Florida, and 3 guys in 36 hours makes headlines, and Florida makes headlines, and national media likes to say things about Florida because the fans are passionate and they will react and they'll click and you'll get your clicks. I don't see this as a Billy Napier or a Florida issue as much as it is a college football NCAA issue that you're just seeing happening at Florida right now.
Yeah, and I will also say to that point, like I think if all three of those guys didn't get an opportunity in late February to go coach in the NFL, they'd still be at Florida right now, getting ready to start spring football next week. So this is an opportunity to make that jump, and especially if it's something that's been your goal, like Napier has said has been the case with Tony. You're going to take the opportunity.